The lights from the restaurant shimmered like cruel jewels across the wet street as Nola sat in the cold darkness of her old car. The engine off, she clutched a small, perfectly wrapped gift box in her lap. She could hear the laughter, bright and sharp, spilling out every time the restaurant door opened, cutting through the night air. Her mother's birthday celebration. A party, a warm room full of family. A place she was explicitly, coldly, told not to come. Her brother's words, sent via a text message that felt like a slap, echoed in her head. Mom doesn't want you there. You'll just ruin everything, like always. So, she stayed parked across the street, alone, watching the silhouettes of her family toast and laugh through the frosted glass. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that Nola wasn't the same broken, silent failure they had thrown aside. And before this night ended, her silence, the very thing they despised, would speak louder than every single word they ever used to try and break her. Nola grew up feeling like a ghost in her own home. She wasn't just invisible, she was an inconvenience, a shadow that followed them around, reminding them of something they didn't quite understand. Her brother, Morrow Jr., was the son their parents orbited. He was loud, he was confident, and every one of his achievements, no matter how small, was praised as if he had conquered the world. Every wall in their house seemed to have a picture of him holding a trophy, wearing a graduation cap, or shaking someone's hand. But Nola was the quiet moon, reflecting nothing they valued. She didn't talk much. She preferred the silent company of her bedroom, lost in the glow of her beat-up, second-hand computer. Her real world was inside that machine. She was learning to code, to build digital worlds from nothing, to speak a language of logic and creation. That felt more like home than her actual house. Her parents didn't understand her world. To them, her hours spent in front of the screen looked like laziness, like a total waste of time. When she once tried, excitedly, to explain a small program she had built to help organize recipes, her father had laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a laugh of dismissal. You can't make a living sitting behind a screen. Nola, learn something useful, like your brother. Go out and meet people. His words weren't just criticism. They were a complete dismissal of her entire being. They cut deeper than he could ever know. But Nola didn't argue. She didn't cry in front of him. She simply gave that small, empty smile she had perfected over the years, the one that said, "You're right," even when her heart was screaming, "You're wrong." Even when it hurt so much, she felt like she couldn't breathe. She had learned that no matter what she did, no matter what she built or achieved in her secret world, she would never be enough for them. Every family gathering was a masterclass in her not being important. It was always the same script. Her parents would proudly tell stories about Morrow Jr.'s latest achievement, his promotions at the bank, his new business plans, his undeniable charm. Morrow just closed the biggest deal of his quarter. Her father would boom. "He's a natural leader," her mother would add, beaming. When it came to Nola, if anyone asked, they said little or nothing. Sometimes they would joke, "Oh, Nola, she's probably hiding behind her laptop somewhere, in her own little world." It embarrassed her deeply, made her skin feel hot and her stomach twist, but she stayed quiet. She would just look down at her plate, wishing she could disappear completely. What they didn't see, what they never bothered to look for, was the fire burning inside her. It was a quiet, steady determination to prove that her dreams were not foolish, that her little world was bigger than they could imagine. At night, when the house was finally silent and everyone else was asleep, Nola truly lived. She watched tutorials. She wrote thousands of lines of code. She designed complex systems on her old, slow computer. The glowing screen became her escape, her teacher, her best friend. She believed, with a desperate kind of faith, that one day, all this work, all this patience, would mean something. But each day spent in that house was a painful reminder that she didn't belong, that no matter how hard she tried, her family would never, ever see her true worth. Sometimes she wished they'd just ask, just a simple, "How are you doing, Nola?" Or "What are you working on?" Or even a small "That looks interesting." But they never did. They only compared her to her brother, constantly reminding her that he was the real success, the one they were proud of. So Nola stopped trying to please them. She stopped hoping for their approval. She started to focus only on herself, learning quietly, growing slowly, and building her strength in the silence they forced upon her. They called her lazy. They called her a failure. They called her strange. But Nola knew something they didn't. Silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes, it's the space where great and powerful things are born. And while they mocked her for doing nothing, she was quietly, patiently, preparing to become everything they never believed she could be. when their mother's 60th birthday was coming up. Nola wanted to do something special. Despite all the years of hurt, despite the constant feeling of being second best, she still loved her mother deeply. She saved money for weeks from small freelance coding jobs she did in secret. She bought a beautiful, delicate gold locket. She had it engraved with simple words, "For the woman who taught me strength." It was simple, but it was meaningful. It came straight from her heart. She imagined her mother opening it, smiling a real smile, maybe even hugging her for once, a real hug. Before the big day, Nola sent a message to her brother, Mauro Jr., her hands shaking slightly with a mix of hope and fear. She just asked about the time and place for the birthday dinner. She waited, her heart pounding, excited to finally be part of a family celebration. But when his reply came, her heart didn't just sink, it shattered. He wrote, "Mom doesn't want you there. You'd ruin her mood. Just send your gift if you have one." Nola stared at the message for a long time, reading it again and again, as if the words would change. Her hands trembled, and her chest felt heavy, like a stone was pressing down on her lungs. This wasn't just rejection. This was erasure. It was like they were officially telling her she didn't exist in the family anymore. For all these years, she had been quiet, forgiving, and endlessly patient. She held on to a tiny, foolish hope that maybe one day they would see her differently. But that single, cold text message showed her the truth. They never would. She sat in the silence of her room for hours, holding the small locket she had bought with so much love. Tears filled her eyes, burning, but she refused to let them fall. She would not cry for them. Not anymore. Instead, she took a deep, shuddering breath, wiped her face, and began to wrap the gift box again, carefully. She tied it with a perfect golden ribbon. She wrote no name on the card. She sent it through the mail, anonymously. Her mother would still get her gift. She just wouldn't know it came from the daughter she had so easily forgotten. That night, Nola lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling. Every memory of being ignored played in her mind on a loop. The times they laughed at jokes she wasn't part of, the times they mocked her passions, and the countless moments she had been left out, standing alone in a room full of her own family. Something inside her shifted. It was a small, quiet click, like a lock falling into place. The girl who kept waiting for their love, the girl who kept hoping for their approval, was gone. The silence that used to hurt her, the silence that felt like a punishment, now became her shield and her weapon. She whispered to the darkness, "They want silence. I'll give them silence." But this time, it wasn't the kind of silence that came from pain or fear. It was the kind of silence that grows deep and powerful, right before something big begins. Nola decided, in that moment, she would disappear from their world, not in defeat, but in preparation. One day, her silence would speak louder than every cruel word they had ever said. And when that day came, they would remember the daughter they had so carelessly erased. After that painful message from her brother, Nola packed her bags. She didn't pack much, just her clothes and her computer. She left home quietly, without a word, without a note. She moved to a different part of the city, a place far from the people who made her feel so small and invisible. She rented a tiny one-room apartment, just big enough for a small bed, a desk, and her laptop. There, she decided to start over. No more trying to please anyone. No more waiting for love that never came. She would build her own world, a world where she mattered. She named her new project a small tech startup she built from nothing but pure faith, her incredible skill, and countless sleepless nights. The beginning was harder than anything she had ever done. It was brutal. Investors didn't take her seriously. She would walk into meetings, a quiet girl with a powerful idea, and they would look right through her. Most of them wanted big names, loud voices, and flashy backgrounds. Not a quiet, unknown girl who came from nowhere. She sent dozens, then hundreds, of proposals. She got rejected every single time. Some clients would show interest at first, impressed by her code. But then they would back out when they saw she was working alone from a tiny apartment. Her savings started to run low. She ate instant noodles for dinner most nights, but she refused to give up. Every single night, she sat in front of her old computer, her eyes tired and burning, but her heart more determined than ever, building her dream, one line of code at a time. One evening, after weeks of working almost without rest, Nola finally finished her first real prototype. It was a brilliant AI program designed to help small businesses automate their customer support, making it smarter and more human-like. She uploaded a short demo online to a tech forum, just hoping maybe anyone, would notice. She didn't expect much. She went to sleep, exhausted, but the next morning, her inbox was full of messages. 1. in particular, made her heart stop. A global tech company, one of the biggest in the world, had found her project. They wanted to talk. They said her idea was unique, powerful, and full of massive potential. They invited her to Dubai to discuss a partnership deal. Nola could hardly believe it. She read the email 10 times. The same girl who had been told she was wasting her time behind a screen. The girl, her father told to learn something useful, was now being recognized and flown out by one of the biggest tech firms in the world. When she arrived in Dubai, she walked into the massive glass-walled meeting room. She was nervous, but she held her head high. She walked with a quiet confidence she didn't know she had. She didn't need their approval anymore. She had earned her own. The deal went through, and within months Novamind grew faster than she ever could have imagined. She hired a small, brilliant team. She opened a real office. She started getting media attention. A year later, her company was valued in the millions. Reporters wanted to tell her story. Magazines and tech blogs started calling her the tech queen of Africa, the quiet genius. Yet, through all the noise, through all the success, one thing never changed. Her phone never rang with a call from home. Not one single message saying, "We're proud of you, Nola," or even, "How are you?" But Nola didn't wait for it anymore. She had found something much stronger than their approval. She had found her purpose. And this time, she wasn't building for them. She was building for herself. One afternoon, as Nola was finishing a big meeting with her new investors, her phone buzzed. She glanced down and saw a name she hadn't seen in many, many months. Morrow Jr. For a long moment, she just stared at the screen. A cold feeling washed over her. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to just press the red button and make him disappear. But something inside her, a new calm strength, whispered to pick up. She answered, her voice soft and even, unsure of what to expect. "Hey sis, long time, no talk." Morrow's cheerful, booming voice came through the line, as if nothing had ever happened, as if he hadn't been the one to banish her from the family. "So, guess what? Mom's birthday is coming up again. We're planning something really big this year." Nolan's heart didn't skip. It just felt heavy. The last birthday was still so fresh in her memory. The cold text message. The night she sat in her car, outside the restaurant, holding her small gift, watching them laugh without her. That pain, that one night, had been the fire that pushed her to rebuild her entire life. And now, the same brother who told her to stay away, the one who said she would ruin everything, was suddenly calling her sis again. She stayed perfectly quiet, just listening, as he kept talking, rambling on about the plans. "It's going to be a grand event this time, at the fanciest hotel in the city. Maybe you can help out. You know, contribute a bit, cover the venue cost or something. You're doing really well now, right? We see your name in the papers." And right there, it was the reason for the call. It was the same tone, the same manipulation, the same selfishness. They didn't want her there out of love. They wanted her money. They wanted her success. Not once did he ask how she was doing. Not once did he ask what she had been through to get where she was. He only cared about what she could give them. Nola felt a small, slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It was a smile of pure, cold understanding. They hadn't changed at all. She spoke calmly, her voice steady and clear. "I'll think about it," she said. "Send me the details." When she ended the call, Nola sat quietly in her big office for a few minutes, looking out over the city. The old pain tried to return, that old sting of rejection, but this time, it didn't break her. It didn't even crack her. Instead, it fueled her. She wasn't the forgotten girl crying in her car anymore. The woman who once had to mail a gift anonymously now owned one of the fastest growing companies in the country. She had power. She had presence. And most importantly, she had peace, something her family had never given her. That night, Nola looked at her reflection in the mirror and smiled. The same people who told her she didn't belong, the same people who threw her out, now wanted her at their table. But she would come on her own terms. She wouldn't show up as the failure they pitied. She would show up as absolute proof that silence can rebuild an empire. In her heart, she whispered, "This time, I won't just attend the party, I'll own it." They thought they were inviting the same old, quiet Nola. But this year, she would return. Not as the outcast they rejected, but as the storm they never, ever saw coming. The night of the grand birthday banquet finally arrived. The Morrow family had spared no expense, renting out the main ballroom in one of the most luxurious five-star hotels in Lagos. The room was breathtaking. It sparkled with thousands of golden lights. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling. and elegant flower arrangements adorned every table. Guests in expensive designer clothes and sparkling jewelry filled the room. Politicians, business partners, and old family friends all gathered to celebrate Nolan's mother's 61st birthday. The event looked perfect, a picture of wealth and happiness. But behind all the glamour, all the smiling faces, was a truth that no one in that room knew. Not yet. As guests mingled, their laughter echoed through the grand hall. Morrow Jr. was in his element, moving from table to table, greeting people with a proud, wide smile, accepting congratulations. He felt like the king of the world. When an old family friend asked him, "Where's your sister, Morrow? Didn't she come this time either?" He chuckled, a dismissive, arrogant sound. "Oh, Nola. She's probably still off chasing her little laptop dreams somewhere. You know how she is." A few people around him laughed politely, completely unaware of the massive irony behind his words. Nola's name was not on the guest list. Her family hadn't mentioned her to anyone. To them, she was still the quiet, forgotten girl. The family embarrassment, who didn't belong in their shiny world of wealth and attention. They had absolutely no idea that every single detail of this grand celebration, the music, the decorations, the 5-course meal, even the very hall they were standing in had been paid for, in full, by the very person they had erased, weeks earlier, when Nola's brother called to invite her and hinted that she should contribute. She decided to go far beyond his expectations. Instead of just helping, she secretly, through her company, took over the full sponsorship of the entire event. Her company Novamind had recently partnered with the hotel's technology systems, so it was easy for her to arrange everything quietly, under her brand name. The family, in their arrogance, never even checked who was funding the event. They just assumed it came from one of their wealthy friends or that the hotel was giving them a discount. Now, as the party continued, Nola waited behind the scenes, in a private suite upstairs. She was calm. She was composed. She wasn't there for revenge. Revenge was loud and messy. She was there to simply, quietly, remind them who she had become. Her success wasn't loud or boastful. It was graceful, steady, and undeniable. She wanted the truth to reveal itself naturally, in front of everyone who had once laughed at her, everyone who had once dismissed her. The MC, a popular city host, took the stage to thank the sponsors of the night. "Before we continue," he said, his voice full of excitement, "we'd like to share a short message from a very special guest, the true visionary, the woman behind tonight's incredible success." The lights in the ballroom began to dim, and a hush fell over the room. Faces turned toward the giant screen at the front. In just a few seconds, the truth that would change everything was about to appear. The same Nola they once ignored was about to walk into their world again, not as the failure they left behind, but as the force that made their entire celebration possible. As the music softened and the lights dimmed to a dramatic low, the MC held the microphone with a bright smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice booming through the speakers, "before we continue this wonderful celebration for Mrs. Ma, we have a very special message from someone who made this entire, beautiful night possible." The crowd quieted, their curiosity piqued. The big screen at the front of the room flickered to life. A few guests leaned forward, wondering which politician or business tycoon this mystery person could be. Then a logo appeared. Sleek and silver. Novamind Technologies. A wave of appreciative murmurs went through the audience. The company had become famous, a household name, known for its groundbreaking work in artificial intelligence. Moments later, a professionally produced video began to play, showing clips of modern, bright offices, young engineers working passionately, and the words "Empowering Africa Through Innovation" fading across the screen. And then, Nolan's face appeared. She filled the entire screen. For a long, stunned second, the entire ballroom fell completely, totally silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Her parents' eyes widened to circles. Her father's wineglass stopped halfway to his mouth. Her mother stared, her lips parted. Her brother, Morrow Jr., who had been in the middle of a loud laugh, froze. His smile just dropped off his face. Everyone recognized her instantly. The daughter they rarely spoke about, the sister who was too quiet, too odd, the one they had just been laughing about. Nola looked serene, powerful, and utterly calm on the screen, dressed in a sleek suit. Her voice steady and warm as it filled the room. "I couldn't attend last year," she said, looking straight into the camera, as if looking into their souls. "I was told I would ruin the celebration." A few polite, confused gasps came from the crowd. People turned to look at Nolan's family, smiling, thinking this was all just a beautiful, elaborate, family surprise. "So this year," Nola's voice continued, "I decided I would make it unforgettable, in my own way." The audience, still unaware of the deep, painful truth, broke into warm applause. They had no idea what was really happening. They didn't know that the entire event, from the crystal lights to the expensive music to the luxurious decor, had been paid for by the very woman they had just watched her family ignore. The video continued, showing the stunning achievements of Nova Mind, the awards, the global partnerships, and its founder's story of resilience and innovation. Her voiceover spoke about building from pain, turning rejection into purpose, and believing in the kind of silence that grows stronger with time. Every word carried emotion, truth, and a quiet, unshakable power. By the time the video ended, the applause was thunderous. People cheered, some gave a standing ovation, others whispered to each other about how incredibly inspiring her story was. But while the entire crowd celebrated, Nolan's family sat frozen in disbelief, as if they had been turned to stone. Her father's hand was visibly trembling. Her mother stared at the blank screen, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Morrow Jr. couldn't find a single word to say. His face was pale. The truth hit them all at once, like a physical wave. The daughter they once told not to come, the one they called a failure, had built the empire that made this entire night possible. As the lights slowly came back on, the MC said proudly, "Please give a huge round of applause for the founder and CEO of Novamind, Miss Nola Morrow." The entire room erupted again. Cameras flashed. Guests turned toward the main entrance, waiting for her to appear. And in that moment, her family finally, truly, realized that the girl they had erased had returned, not in anger, but in undeniable power. As the applause echoed through the grand hall, the main doors at the back slowly opened. All eyes turned toward the entrance. Nola stepped in. She was wearing a simple yet breathtakingly elegant white gown that shimmered under the lights. She looked calm, confident, and completely untouchable. Beside her, walking as her personal guests, were two of the most well-known tech investors in the country, and a few other business leaders who had flown in just for this. The guests whispered in admiration, realizing the woman they had just seen on the screen, the mind behind Novamind, was now right there in front of them. Her brother, Morrow Jr., froze where he stood. His confident, arrogant smile was gone, completely vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, blank disbelief. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth as if trying to physically hold back a sob. Her father's face turned pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else. Maybe guilt. They had spent the entire evening bragging about their success, their connections. They were completely unaware that the real star of the night, the true center of power in the room, was their own daughter, the one they had told, just 1 year ago, not to come. Nola walked slowly through the crowd, greeting a few guests politely as she made her way, step by steady step, toward her family's table at the front. People clapped as she passed, still thinking this was a touching, wonderful family surprise. To them, it looked like a perfect reunion, a loving daughter returning to honor her mother. But beneath all that polite applause, the tension at that front table was sharp enough to cut the air. When she finally reached the table, her father was the first to find his voice, though it was shaky. "Nola, you did all this?" he asked, his tone trembling, caught somewhere between a strange new pride and a deep, suffocating guilt. Nola smiled softly, a small, calm smile. She looked him straight in the eye. "You told me I'd ruin the party last year, remember?" she said, her voice quiet but clear. "Looks like I upgraded it instead." The crowd around them laughed and clapped again, thinking it was a heartfelt, witty joke between a father and daughter. Cameras flashed, and reporters leaned in, trying to capture this beautiful family moment. But Nolan's calm/steady eyes told a very different story. This wasn't a reunion born of love. This was the quiet, graceful triumph of someone who had learned to rise without anyone's applause. Her brother, Morrow Jr., tried to regain his composure, to put his mask back on. You really surprised us, sis," he said awkwardly, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You've come a long way." "Yes," Nola replied gently, her gaze shifting to him. "I had too, since I wasn't invited to follow your path." Her words were smooth, polite, but sharp enough to sting, and he visibly flinched. Her mother reached out a trembling hand, trying to touch her arm. Her eyes were filled with a chaotic mix of emotions: pride, guilt, confusion, and disbelief. "Nola," she whispered, we didn't know." Nola nodded softly, stopping her before she could say more. "I know, Mom. You never did." The audience clapped again, still completely misreading the entire situation, still thinking it was a beautiful exchange of love. But as Nola stood there, bathed in the flashing lights, surrounded by applause that was finally for her, Her heart was perfectly steady. She wasn't here for revenge. She wasn't here for an apology. She was here to remind them, and herself, that silence is not weakness. Sometimes, silence is just the sound of strength, rebuilding itself. After the event finally ended, long after most guests had left, still buzzing about the shocking and touching revelation, Nola's family asked her to step aside for a private talk. They found a quiet, empty corner in the hotel's grand lounge, away from the last of the cameras and the curious eyes of the hotel staff. Her mother was the first to speak, her voice trembling as she desperately tried to hold back her tears. We were just trying to protect you from disappointment, Nola," she said, reaching out to touch her daughter's hand again. Nola didn't pull away this time, but her face stayed calm, unreadable. She took a deep breath before replying, her words slow and deliberate, each one chosen with care. "No, Mom. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your image. You didn't want people to see me fail, because you never, not for 1 second, believed I could succeed." Her father sighed heavily, rubbing his forehead. "You have to understand, Nola. We only wanted what we thought was best for you," he said quietly. Nola shook her head slowly. "The best for me, or the best for you? You told me to stop dreaming. You told me to stop embarrassing the family with my little hobby. You shut me out when I needed you the most. You all thought my silence meant I was weak, that I was broken, but it just meant I was busy building something you couldn't even imagine." Her mother's eyes filled with a deep, painful guilt, but her brother, still feeling uncomfortable, still unable to face the truth, tried to lighten the mood. "Come on, sis," he said, forcing a laugh that sounded loud and ugly in the quiet lounge. "Don't be so dramatic. It's all in the past. You're successful now. You won. Why bring up all this old stuff?" Nola turned to him, slowly. Her expression was no longer calm. It was sharp enough to cut right through his fake smile. "Old stuff," she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "You laughed at me when I had nothing. You told people I was a failure. You made jokes about me behind my back. You, Morrow, erased me from this family, long before I ever walked away." Her brother's grin faded instantly. The room went completely quiet. For a long moment, no one spoke. The heavy weight of her words, of all the years of truth, hung in the air. Nola stood up, adjusting the jacket of her gown. Her tone was calm again, but it was final. "You all taught me something very important. That love without respect is just a form of control. I spent years, my entire childhood, trying to earn your approval. Now, I don't need it." Her mother whispered, "Nola, please." But she didn't finish. Nola had already turned toward the door. She paused for just one brief second, looked back at the three of them, frozen in their guilt. "You erased me once," she said softly. "But don't worry, I've learned to live just fine without being seen." And with that, she walked out of the lounge, her footsteps silent on the thick carpet, leaving her family frozen in a new kind of silence. They finally, truly, realized that the girl they had once ignored was gone forever, replaced by a woman who no longer needed their validation to exist. In the weeks that followed, the story of Nola Morrow took over the internet. Magazines, blogs, and news channels all ran the same headline. In one form or another, the girl who funded the party that banned her. People couldn't stop talking about it. Social media was flooded with clips from the event, her calm, powerful video message, her graceful entrance, and the visibly shocked faces of her family. Everyone was inspired by how she had handled her pain, not with loud revenge or public anger, but with quiet, undeniable power. Her story became a symbol, a rallying cry for anyone who had ever been rejected, overlooked, or underestimated by their own family. People shared posts saying, "Be like Nola. Let your success speak louder than their silence." The world finally saw what her family never did: her strength, her intelligence, her resilience, her grace. Meanwhile, things began to fall apart for the Morrows. Their family business, which had once been known for luxury and wealth, started losing clients. Old investors pulled out after seeing the headlines and the wave of public criticism online. Customers didn't want to be associated with a family that had become famous for treating their own daughter so poorly. It wasn't Nolan's doing. She never said a word. It was just karma, unfolding quietly, just as life often does. But Nola never celebrated their downfall. She didn't post a single thing about it. She didn't respond to the dozens of reporters asking for interviews about her family. She didn't say a single bad word about them to anyone. Instead, she focused on her work. Her company Novamind was expanding rapidly across the continent, attracting global investors who deeply admired her leadership and her calm, unshakable resilience. One morning, news broke that Nola had made a massive donation, but it wasn't to a tech project or her company's partners. She donated millions to several women's shelters and educational programs for girls across Nigeria. And she did it all in her mother's name. The gesture shocked everyone, especially her family. Her mother saw the announcement on the morning news and broke down in tears. Finally, she couldn't understand how the daughter they had ignored, the one they had hurt so deeply, could still show such kindness. That single, quiet act spoke louder than any speech or confrontation ever could. Nola didn't do it for forgiveness. She didn't do it for fame. She did it because she had learned that true power isn't in shouting about your pain. It's in turning it into purpose. Her silence was not weakness. It was strength, dressed in peace. Over time, people began calling her the voice of the voiceless. Her interviews and quotes were shared everywhere, especially her most famous one. You don't have to fight to be seen. Just grow so much that they can't possibly look away. Her family never publicly responded, but they knew the truth. Nolan's silence had spoken. Her success had roared. And the girl they once pushed aside had become a woman the entire world now celebrated, not because she shouted back, but because she rose higher, without ever looking down. Months later, Nola stood on the biggest stage of her life, the keynote speaker at the Women in Tech Summit in Lagos. The massive hall was filled with thousands of women students, leaders, and young girls who had followed her journey from rejection to triumph. The giant screen behind her showed her name in bold, glowing letters, Nola Moro, founder of Novamind. As the deafening applause finally faded, she took a deep breath, smiled gently at the crowd, and began to speak. She looked around the room, her voice calm, but vibrating with emotion. Sometimes, she began, family tells you not to show up, not because you don't belong, but because your light exposes their shadows. The crowd went completely silent. Every word felt personal, like she was speaking directly to the hearts of everyone in that room who had ever been told they weren't good enough. Don't argue, she continued, her voice growing stronger. Don't fight to be understood. Don't beg for a seat at their table. Just build. Build quietly. Build with purpose. Let your success be the thing that walks in the room before you. Her words hit deep. Many women in the audience had tears in their eyes. Some stood up, clapping, moved by how someone who had been silenced for so long could now speak with so much grace and unshakable strength. The cameras flashed, recording every moment. Within hours, her speech had spread across social media, was being played on news channels, and filled timelines across the globe. Nola didn't stay for long after the event. She walked out quietly, away from the lights, the noise, and the applause, into the cool evening air. The city lights of Lagos shimmered across the skyline. This was the same city that once felt too big, too cold, too cruel. But tonight, it felt like home. She thought about everything. The rejection, the humiliation, the long, lonely nights. She cried while building her dream. Every painful memory now felt distant, like a story she had already finished. A chapter she had already closed. She whispered softly to herself, smiling at how far she had come. They told me not to show up, she said to the city, but now, the world can't start without me. Those words weren't about pride, they were about freedom. She had finally learned that she didn't need their validation, their approval, or their applause. She just needed to keep showing up, for herself. As she walked away from the building, people called her name. Reporters tried to follow, but Nola didn't look back. Her silence had already said everything. The girl who was once told to stay away had become the woman the world was now waiting to hear from.